Some stories don't just happen. They awaken something inside, something that has been waiting without knowing it. It starts with a look that doesn't merely glance but lingers, piercing past the surface and touching the quiet corners of the heart. Then comes the pull, steady and undeniable, a desire that feels like it was written into the stars long before anyone knew. Skin meets skin, breath intertwines, and what begins as a night of tender intimacy quickly stretches into a lifetime pressed into hours. Even after the darkness fades, the warmth lingers, body and soul remembering every moment as if it were a vow. Here, every glance, every touch, every sigh is a story in itself, a story of connection, of desire, of love that changes everything. Welcome to a space where love is not just told, it is lived, felt, and never forgotten. It started with a glance, one that was fleeting yet heavy, brushing across a crowded room as if the noise and chatter existed only around the edges, never touching the two who had somehow found each other in that moment. There was no awareness of anyone else, only the pull of eyes that had discovered each other and refused to look away. Every subtle tilt of the head, every slight narrowing of the gaze carried a weight that made hearts beat a little faster, a little louder. It was a language without sound, spoken entirely through the meeting of eyes, the brief crossing of attention that lingered longer than it had any right to. In public spaces, surrounded by laughter and music, the look could cut through everything like a secret only understood by the two involved. A glance across a room, and suddenly the world felt smaller, sharper, as if the air itself had condensed around that silent acknowledgement. There was danger in it, a thrill that made the chest tighten and palms slightly sweat, because what was happening was both forbidden and inevitable. It was a fire burning quietly, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but scorching to those who shared it. Even in the quiet corners, away from prying eyes, there was no need for words. One look spoke of longing, of memories of moments that had yet to happen, but already felt real. It whispered promises that neither dared voice aloud, hints of closeness that could be felt in the slight leaning toward each other, in the pause of movement when attention lingered too long. Every flicker of the gaze was deliberate, and yet it felt instinctual, as though some unseen force guided the eyes to meet and stay locked, even for a heartbeat. The hidden glances carried more than desire. They held recognition, understanding, and a tenderness that surprised both. They were small, almost insignificant to an observer, but to those involved, they were monumental. Each fleeting moment of eye contact became a small eternity, building a connection that words might ruin if they ever dared to be spoken. And there was a rhythm to it, a silent pulse of attention given and returned, a constant ebb and flow that neither could break nor wished to. Sometimes the look would hold longer than necessary, daring to linger just slightly beyond comfort, and in those moments the air between them seemed to hum. Breaths became synchronized, pulses quickened, and there was an unspoken acknowledgement of the danger and the inevitability. There was something both tender and raw in this exchange, a vulnerability laid bare through nothing more than sight. It was an intimacy that could not be touched, but felt more profoundly than any spoken declaration. Even when attention drifted elsewhere, the memory of that look remained, embedded in the corners of the mind like a secret treasure. Hands brushed against each other accidentally, but it was the eyes that remembered first, retracing the silent language that had already been spoken. A simple meeting of gazes in passing could rekindle the spark, reminding both of the connection that had silently grown in spaces no one else could see. Every hidden glance was a promise and a question wrapped into one, never needing words to explain its meaning. There were moments when the eyes met and lingered despite distance, across tables, across rooms, across fleeting chances. Those glances carried longing, curiosity, a subtle dare, and a softness that no voice could replicate. They spoke of stories yet to unfold, of nights filled with closeness and days spent in quiet anticipation, and yet they remained hidden, private, sacred, a dialogue invisible to all but those who shared it. It was a dance of understanding, a negotiation of boundaries, a silent weaving of desire and care that only grew stronger with time. The hidden glances became habitual, a necessary exchange that sustained the connection even when circumstances kept the two apart. They became proof that some forms of intimacy did not need words, that the deepest understanding could pass through the eyes alone, quietly, insistently, unbreakable. And in every glance there was a reassurance, a spark that told both silently, here, in this look, we have found something true, something undeniable, something that will not be forgotten. Some glances are fleeting. Some last a lifetime. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the first shiver before a storm. There was a tension in the air that neither had to acknowledge aloud. It existed in the way steps shortened when approaching one another, in the way hands brushed and lingered longer than intended. Each encounter felt predestined, as though some invisible thread had been spun long ago, winding through time and space to ensure this exact meeting. The pull was magnetic, irresistible, subtle yet insistent, threading itself into every glance and every motion. It wasn't the feverish kind of desire that flares and fades. It was steadier, deeper, rooted in something that seemed older than both of them. The accidental brush of an arm against a shoulder sparked a quiet recognition, a flutter that felt both foreign and familiar at once. It was as if the skin itself remembered something that the mind had yet to comprehend. Every step closer carried the weight of inevitability. Footsteps slowed unconsciously when near, hearts quickened without conscious thought, and breaths seemed to synchronize without intention. Words became secondary, almost unnecessary, because the pull communicated in its own language, a language of longing, anticipation, and quiet acknowledgement. Each subtle movement spoke volumes, the tilt of a head, a half smile, a soft exhale in passing. These moments, though fleeting, were charged with the intensity of everything unsaid. Everything held in tension between two bodies drawn together by forces beyond comprehension. It was not about control or strategy, nor about the conventional dance of courtship. There was no need for force or pursuit. The energy between them required no encouragement. It moved them naturally, inevitably. When eyes met across a crowded room, the world seemed to vanish around the edges, leaving only the pull, the gravitational tug that neither could resist. Every glance, every brush of clothing, every shared laughter carried a quiet insistence. Move closer, stay near, surrender. The magnetic energy was patient yet urgent, a paradox that lived in every heartbeat. Even in moments apart, the memory of contact lingered, drawing attention back with a quiet insistence. Each absence deepened the awareness of the presence. Every thought carried the echo of warmth, the sense of proximity, the memory of the tension threading through flesh and breath. It was impossible to ignore, because it was not superficial. It threaded into consciousness, inhabiting mind and body alike. Conversation, when it arrived, was effortless, but always underlined with that same unspoken pull. Words were secondary to the gravity that governed them. Even silence became a medium of communication. A shared look held more weight than paragraphs of speech. Laughter shared across a small distance felt like confirmation, a nod from the universe itself, that this connection was meant, inevitable, and unavoidable. Even the simplest touches carried weight. A hand lightly brushing against a knee, an arm nudged closer during a walk, a shoulder leaning slightly in passing. Each gesture became an affirmation of the connection. None of it was staged or calculated. The pull dictated the rhythm, the flow, the closeness, and the deeper it moved, the more undeniable it became. Resistance felt futile, not because of pressure, but because the heart recognized something it could not unsee, a presence meant to intertwine with its own. Time seemed to dilate around these interactions. A single step closer could feel like minutes, yet the awareness of inevitability made every second feel precious, monumental. Memory and anticipation entwined, creating a continuous loop of longing and fulfillment. The pull was patient. It didn't demand immediacy, but it demanded acknowledgement. To deny it would be to deny a fundamental truth, one that vibrated in every nerve, every pulse, every sigh. And then, when a hand finally found another, it was both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because it was a hand, a gesture anyone could make, yet extraordinary because it carried the weight of all that magnetic tension, all that quiet anticipation, all that inevitability. The fingers intertwined naturally, without hesitation, without conscious thought, and it was enough to confirm what had been silently understood from the very first glance. This was a connection that could not be avoided, a pull that would not be denied. Every movement from that moment forward seemed to align with the magnetic force that had always existed between them. Steps were measured, touches intentional without intention, proximity guided by a gravity that felt cosmic. Even when apart, the pull lingered, manifesting in dreams, in thoughts, in the constant drawing back toward one another. It was a force that demanded recognition, reverence, and surrender. And in that surrender, there was clarity, a quiet acknowledgement that some things are destined not because of choice, but because of inevitability. The pull did not require reasoning or explanation. It existed beyond the intellect, beyond time and space, threading its quiet insistence through every shared breath, every brush of skin, every heartbeat. It was relentless, patient, undeniable, and utterly consuming. Some connections arrive like a whisper, almost unnoticed until the weight of their presence can no longer be ignored. This pull was exactly that, a quiet, insistent force, threading through bodies and souls, bending circumstance and space until the two hearts were drawn together, finally, completely, inevitably, and in the end, it was impossible to resist. When the world slept, everything else fell away. The quiet outside seemed almost to bow in deference to the intensity inside. Nights weren't measured in hours or minutes. They were measured in the electricity between breaths, in the way a single glance could anchor the heart, and in the weight of every touch that lingered long after skin had separated. It began with a closeness that didn't need explanation, the kind of intimacy that forms when two people recognize each other in the way the universe had intended, body, mind, and soul aligned without words. Hands traced familiar curves, but every trace felt new, alive, as though rediscovering a secret map that had been waiting for these very fingers to navigate. Each brush of lips carried the memory of the last, but also the promise of what could come next. There was no rush, no clumsy urgency. Every movement was deliberate, every pause full of anticipation, every sigh weighted with unspoken understanding. The fire of desire wasn't a blaze meant to consume recklessly. It was the steady, enduring kind that warms from the inside, that lingers long after the night ends. It was passion tempered with tenderness, excitement softened by care. Every embrace was an exploration of trust, two hearts daring to meet completely without fear. The smallest gestures became monumental, the brush of a hand along the jaw, the tilt of a chin to invite a kiss, the way a body curves instinctively toward warmth and protection. Even the air seemed to carry meaning. Every whisper was amplified by the hush of night. Every laugh that escaped carried its own rhythm of intimacy. In those hours, vulnerability was not a weakness but a bridge. Walls lowered, and the fragile, tender parts of the soul were invited forward without hesitation. And in return, they were met with understanding, with devotion, with an intensity that didn't demand, but simply existed. Time became something pliable. Minutes stretched to infinity. then contracted in sudden bursts of closeness. Nights like these have a way of rewriting memory. They make ordinary spaces feel sacred, ordinary touches feel eternal. Even as one hand moves to trace a curve for the 1,000th time, it feels like the first. Even as lips meet again and again, every kiss is imbued with the weight of everything that has passed and everything yet to come. It wasn't only about desire. It was about recognition, affirmation, and the unspoken promise that this connection wasn't fleeting. The body remembered what the mind might have doubted. The soul remembered what the heart already knew. There was a sacred rhythm to it, a sense of inevitability. The night became a container, a space where passion and tenderness weren't at odds, but intertwined seamlessly, each enhancing the other. Even when the first hints of dawn brushed the horizon, the intensity did not fade. The warmth carried forward, filling every quiet moment with the memory of touch, the echo of laughter, the imprint of breath. It wasn't just a night. It was a declaration, a beginning that the world outside could not diminish. And in that lingering glow, there was a clarity. Some nights are meant to burn, but the fire they leave behind is what transforms everything. Some nights belong not to the world, but to the hearts that dare to meet fully. The morning light slipped gently through the curtains, soft and hesitant, carrying with it the quiet hum of a world waking up. Usually, sunlight exposes what the night keeps hidden, washes away shadows, and reminds hearts that everything must move on. But this morning was different. The warmth from the night did not fade. It lingered, subtle yet undeniable, threading through every thought and every movement, wrapping around the soul in a quiet insistence that refused to be ignored. Even in the calm of daylight, the memory of closeness clung. It was in the way the skin remembered the gentle brush of fingers, the small pressure of hands resting where they belonged, and the echo of breath mingled with breath in a rhythm that had no beginning or end. Every nerve seemed attuned, alive with an awareness that the night had not been a mere sequence of hours. It had been a convergence of something deeper. Walking through the quiet house, every ordinary object seemed infused with meaning. The warmth wasn't just remembered through sensation. It lived in the mind, in the heart, in every corner that had been touched. Even the soft hum of the kettle seemed to echo with the pulse of intimacy, each rising steam a whisper of shared closeness, a reminder that some connections leave traces far beyond physical presence. It wasn't about longing or desire in the transient sense. It was about recognition. Something had been revealed, unveiled, acknowledged in a way that couldn't be undone. The way the night had drawn two souls together left a permanence that time could not erode. Every glance in the mirror, every step across familiar floorboards, carried the imprint of what had been shared. It was in the subtle turn of the neck, the gentle curl of fingers, the quiet intake of breath when a memory surfaced. Outside, the world continued in its ordinary rhythm. Cars rolled by, voices carried from the streets, sunlight reflected off windows, but none of it broke the tether of what had begun. The heart, once hesitant, now beat with a new certainty. The connection wasn't something fleeting. It was a truth woven into the fabric of being, a silent promise that lingered in every thought and every sensation. Even ordinary moments were transformed. Coffee tasted warmer. The morning breeze felt like an echo of a touch that had left its mark. The body remembered in ways that couldn't be articulated, in ways that spoke louder than words. The soul carried memory in a way that made the mundane feel sacred. What had happened was no longer a secret or a night to be tucked away. It was an initiation into something enduring. The realization settled like sunlight on skin. Some moments do more than pass. Some nights do more than ignite. They imprint, they define, they endure. And even when separated by distance or by the obligations of the day, the warmth remained. It was in the soft tug at the chest when a thought wandered, in the quiet smile when a memory came unbidden. in the subtle shift in posture, as if the body itself knew the truth it had experienced. Time could not erase it, nor circumstance bend it. The night had begun as an encounter, but it had become a foundation. It had rewritten what connection meant, what intimacy could be, and what love could leave behind. Even the simplest touch now carried layers of remembered fire and tenderness, carrying the knowledge that the heart could hold on to more than just fleeting moments. This wasn't a story of secrecy or of one night alone. It was a story of enduring presence, of a bond that stayed alive beyond the hours, beyond sight, beyond reason. Every heartbeat was a reminder, every quiet breath a testament that some truths do not vanish when the sun rises. They only grow stronger, embedding themselves in the essence of the person who experienced them. Some experiences do not belong to the night alone. They belong to every day after, to every glance, every thought, every moment where the soul remembers what the body once held. And in that quiet, undeniable way, the heart learns that some connections are permanent, written not in fleeting hours, but in the lasting echo of love that refuses to fade. Even as the world moved on outside, the warmth persisted. It was not a fleeting ember, but a fire that had found a home, one that would live on in memory, in feeling, and in the quiet understanding that the beginning of something eternal does not wait for another night. It continues in every breath that follows. Because some love does not end with dawn it stays, it grows, it becomes forever. If this story stirred something deep inside, let it stay there and grow. For more unforgettable, heart-touching stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every story here is a heartbeat you can feel. Don't miss the next one.